Most people believe that fat clogs arteries. If that were entirely true, heart disease would have been solved decades ago. We would simply remove fat from our diets and the problem would quietly disappear. But arteries do not clog the way grease hardens inside a drain. The real process is slower, more biological, and far more silent. You can feel completely healthy while plaque is forming inside your blood vessels. There is no early pain, no obvious warning sign, just gradual change taking place beneath the surface year after year. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Some of the top foods that contribute to clogged arteries may still be sitting in your daily meals, appearing normal, even harmless. Stay with me until the end of this video to understand exactly how this happens. But before we talk about the foods themselves, we need to answer a more important question first. What actually clogs your arteries? Arteries do not become blocked overnight. They change slowly, from the inside out. The inner lining of your blood vessels is called the endothelium. When it is healthy, it allows blood to flow smoothly and produces nitric oxide to keep vessels flexible. It acts as a protective shield between circulating blood and the vessel wall. But when this lining becomes irritated by inflammation or oxidative stress, small areas of dysfunction begin to appear. The surface becomes more permeable. It becomes easier for certain particles in the bloodstream to slip beneath it. One of those particles is LDL, especially the type that carries ApoB. When LDL enters a damaged area of the vessel wall, it can become oxidized. And once oxidized, it triggers an immune response. White blood cells move in to contain what the body perceives as damage. They engulf the oxidized LDL and transform into foam cells. Over time, these foam cells accumulate and form fatty streaks. As this process continues, the vessel wall thickens. Fibrous tissue forms over the area. Calcium may eventually deposit. That layered structure is what we call plaque. So the real issue is not simply dietary fat. Plaque forms when endothelial injury, oxidized lipoproteins, chronic inflammation, and metabolic stress combine. And certain foods strongly influence that internal environment. Group 1. Sugar and fructose. One of the most powerful drivers of metabolic stress is added sugar. When you consume sugar, blood glucose rises and insulin is released to move that glucose into cells. This is normal. But when this happens repeatedly throughout the day, insulin remains elevated more often than it should. Chronically high insulin shifts how your liver processes energy. It increases triglyceride production. Those triglycerides are packaged into particles called VLDL, which later contribute to LDL formation. Over time, this pattern increases the number of small, dense LDL particles circulating in the blood. These smaller particles are more likely to penetrate the endothelial lining and more likely to become oxidized once inside. Fructose plays a particularly important role. Unlike glucose, fructose is metabolized primarily in the liver. In excess amounts, it stimulates fat production within liver cells. This raises triglycerides and increases the number of ApoB-containing particles moving through your bloodstream. And fructose often appears in concentrated forms: soda, sweetened yogurt, breakfast cereals, energy bars, even fruit juice, where fiber has been removed and sugar is delivered rapidly. Sugar does not instantly clog an artery, but it helps create the internal conditions that allow plaque to develop and expand. And sugar is only the beginning. Group 2. Refined starches. Refined starches may not taste sweet, but inside your body, they can behave in a very similar way. White bread, white pasta, crackers, and highly processed cereals are rapidly broken down into glucose. Blood sugar rises quickly. Insulin responds just as quickly. If this pattern repeats multiple times a day, cells gradually become less responsive to insulin. This is insulin resistance, and insulin resistance alters the entire metabolic environment. Triglycerides tend to rise. HDL often falls. Small, dense LDL particles become more common. The endothelial lining becomes more vulnerable to injury. It is not carbohydrates themselves that are inherently harmful. It is the speed of absorption and the frequency of spikes. Refined starches, stripped of fiber and structure, enter the bloodstream rapidly and demand repeated insulin surges. Over time, that repeated metabolic stress contributes to the same internal conditions that favor plaque formation. And when another factor is added to this combination, the effect can become even more pronounced. Group 3. Industrial seed oils and deeply fried foods. Not all fats behave the same way inside the body. Industrial seed oils are commonly extracted under high heat and heavy processing. They are frequently used in deep frying, where temperatures can promote oxidation. When fats oxidize, they form reactive compounds that the body must neutralize. Oxidized lipids can interact with the endothelial lining and amplify inflammatory signals. They can also make circulating LDL particles more susceptible to oxidation. And oxidized LDL is one of the key triggers in plaque formation. This does not mean that every drop of vegetable oil automatically damages your arteries. The issue is context, high heat, repeated frying. Ultra-processed meals, where refined starch, added sugar, and industrial oils are combined in a single serving. Think about a typical fast food meal: a refined bun, sugary sauces, deep-fried meat or potatoes. That combination repeatedly exposes the body to glucose spikes, insulin surges, oxidized fats, and inflammatory stress all at once. Over time, this pattern reinforces the very environment that allows plaque to grow. The dangerous combination. The most powerful driver of arterial damage is not one isolated food. It is the repeated combination of sugar, refined starch, and heavily processed fats. When these appear together, insulin rises, triglycerides increase, small, dense LDL particles become more abundant, oxidative stress builds. The endothelial lining becomes more fragile. This is not about a single meal. It is about repetition. Hundreds, even thousands of exposures over years. Imagine lightly scratching the same surface every day. Each mark is small, almost invisible. But eventually, the surface weakens. Arteries respond in a similar way. Chronic metabolic stress gradually changes their structure from the inside. And this leads to the most practical question. If these are the foods that create the problem, what should replace them? Better food replacements for arterial health. For added sugar and concentrated fructose, the better replacement is whole food sources. Choose whole fruits instead of fruit juice. The fiber slows absorption and reduces sharp insulin spikes. Choose plain, unsweetened yogurt instead of sweetened varieties. Replace sugary drinks with water, sparkling water, or unsweetened green tea. These choices do not eliminate glucose entirely. They moderate its impact and reduce the frequency of insulin surges. For refined starches, shift toward minimally processed carbohydrates. Whole grains that retain their fiber structure are absorbed more slowly. Legumes, such as lentils and beans, provide carbohydrates along with protein and fiber. Root vegetables in their whole form digest differently than finely milled flour products. The key difference is metabolic pacing. Slower digestion means steadier blood sugar and less repeated strain on the insulin system. For heavily processed seed oils and deep-fried foods, Choose fats that are more stable and less exposed to extreme heat. Extra virgin olive oil, used for low to moderate heat cooking or cold applications, provides polyphenols with antioxidant properties. Avocados, nuts, and seeds in their natural form deliver fats without industrial processing. Fatty fish, such as salmon or sardines, provide omega-3 fatty acids that are associated with lower triglyceride levels. These foods do not clean out arteries. There is no magic ingredient that dissolves plaque overnight, but they create a metabolic environment that is less inflammatory and less conducive to further plaque progression. And that final distinction is critical. Arteries do not clog because of one meal. They change because of patterns. Patterns repeated daily, weekly, yearly. Small metabolic signals that never fully reset. Chronic insulin elevation, persistent triglyceride production, repeated oxidative stress, subtle endothelial injury that never completely heals. Over time, these forces reshape the vessel wall from within. What makes this process dangerous is how quiet it is. You can pass a routine checkup. You can feel energetic. You can have no warning signs at all. Meanwhile, plaque may be slowly progressing beneath the surface. The goal is not to fear food. It is to understand biology. When you reduce added sugars, limit refined starches, and minimize heavily processed fried foods, you are not following a trend. You are lowering the frequency of metabolic stress signals that drive plaque formation. When you replace them with whole fruits, fiber-rich carbohydrates, stable fats, and minimally processed meals, you shift the internal environment in a different direction, a direction that supports endothelial function rather than undermines it. There is no single food that suddenly clogs your arteries, and there is no single food that instantly clears them. But there are patterns that quietly build disease, and there are patterns that quietly reduce risk. The difference lies in what repeatedly shows up on your plate. If this helped you see the process more clearly, stay with the channel, because understanding what happens inside your body is the first step toward changing what happens next.